and welcome to our webinar today, COVID-19 Pandemic, a Perspective of Dentist COVID Warrior. I'm very happy to say that the presenter is our own alumna, Dr. Priya Chaurasia. It's a pleasure for me to introduce her. She was my former student. So here I go. Dr. Priya Chaurasia has completed her BDS from Pravara Institute of Medical Sciences, Loni, in 2012. And MDS from JSS University, Mysore in the year 2017. She has always been an academic enthusiast. She's a gold medalist in a final year BDS with distinction in oral pathology. She topped her batch in MDS examinations. She also received the prestigious ICMR grant for her thesis. She has been the chairperson and has judged paper presentations at Connection 2020 conducted by Ternak Dental College. Currently, she is working in Mumbai suburbs as a consultant periodontist and implantologist. She also runs her own clinic, Gingivista, in Mumbai. During this pandemic and lockdown, Dr. Priya decided to step out to work as a COVID warrior. Due to the increasing number of cases in Mumbai, IDA on 24th April issued a notice that even dentists could join as volunteers in Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai. Since then, Dr. Priya is working as a COVID warrior to help in this pandemic. Hence, we are conducting this lecture so that she can give us an insight and share her experiences in handling this panic caused by the pandemic. Welcome, Priya. Very much looking forward to hear your lecture. I think you can start now.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the introduction. I'll just share my screen. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. So I'll start. Thank you, Dr. Deepika, for the introduction. She's been my guide and she's always been very supportive and kind to me. So me as a dentist, after passing out from MDS in 2017, I joined clinics and I was working in the, various dental clinics, and luckily I had got a lot of consultations in Bombay. Later, when on 24th of March, when Narendra Modi declared it as a pandemic, as a lockdown for 21 days, I was very happy that that I'm going to stay home after 3 years, at least for a few days with my parents. But in this 21 days, I tried everything from listening to webinars, doing yogas and diets and everything, and catching up with old friends over video calls. But this did not seem to end. These things went on increasing and the lockdowns kept on increasing. Later, when I used to see all the news, I saw that they were always telling that there was lack of doctors. And me being a doctor, I always thought, what am I doing in this pandemic? Why am I not helping others, and why am I not doing anything? Then luckily on 24th April, IDA published that even dentists could join as a warrior in this pandemic. But my concern was that how will I join? How will I convince my parents that I want to go and work in this pandemic? Even everyone was in a state of fear. So, and also I was fearful that what about my parents? What will happen if I go and join, and if I get infected? What will happen to them in future? So later, when I consulted the IDA members, they told me that they are going to give us separate stay to be quarantined and not be interacting with our parents. So that was one positive point, because then I could stay away from my parents, and even if I get infected, they would be safe. And then I thought that being a doctor, I should give a bit to this. As a doctor, I should share something in this pandemic. So I joined IDA. Through IDA, I joined the MCGM community. Basically, as a COVID warrior, what exactly we are doing? We are initially we trace the positive cases every day. We get a positive line list. We trace the case, the positive line list, and then later we trace the case. We trace the high risk and low risk contacts of that patient. That patient, if he's already hospitalized, we see to that he's being taken care, and if he's at home and he's not hospitalized, we ask for all the signs and symptoms for the patient, and then we take that patient to the respective areas. Like there are various sections that I'll come later in the PPT. Like there are hospitals, there are COVID care centers which are designed by the government. So we take the patient to the respective facility, and the other members of the house and the area, they are at high risk. So they are being traced and they are quarantined at various CCC-1 centers, that is COVID Care 1 centers. So once they are quarantined, we go and we have a team which we send for sanitization of that person's house and the various places where he has visited. We sanitize that area. Also, this is one part of my job. The other part is that we are conducting a large number of camps in areas which are declared as containment zones. So we are conducting camps on every weekly basis. Also, recently, Mumbai has come out with a Mission Zero program in which we are going to take swabs of people and do rapid antigen tests, even if they are not symptomatic and if they are high risk contacts or if they are living close to the positive cases or in containment zone. We are going to diagnose those patients and then get them treated before that patient, the severity increases and it goes to a very bad stage. So this is a gist of what exactly we are doing. So when we go back, as our generation is hearing this pandemic, I think for the first time, or we are facing a pandemic for the first time. But when we see this is way in 1918 where Spanish flu had hit, and there were almost 500 million people infected and 1/5 died. Then came the AIDS, which was in 1981, and it is still persistent. AIDS is still persistent, and there is no vaccine which is developed for AIDS. Then was swine flu, which was from 2009 to 2010. Then came the MERS and SARS and Ebola, which was there. And Ebola hit in such a large way that almost 11,325 people died, in which only 28,000 people were infected. So now there is an outbreak of novel coronavirus which has come from the city of Wuhan, and WHO on 30th January declared that it is a public health emergency of international concern. Whereas on 11th of March, WHO declared this as a pandemic and it was infecting the whole world. If we see India, by the statistics of 10th of July, we stand third in this whole pandemic. We are the population, we are third in this infected country, most infected country. US and Brazil stand the first. But the good news is that if we see the death rate as compared to the number of cases, the death rate in India is very less, and that is one of the good things. And I think this could be given to the early lockdown which was placed by the Prime Minister. It was only 500 cases which were reported, and then it was we were given that it is a lockdown and we were not allowed to move out of our houses. So it was the initial lockdown in which the elderly people were not infected. And as we all know that coronavirus, the death is more amongst the elderly people. So it was for the lockdown. But this lockdown, what exactly this lockdown did? This lockdown instigated a lot of fear and panic amongst the people, that what will happen if we step out, if we touch something. Normally we used to, if there was a flu, we used to just think, okay, it's just fever. But now if someone is getting fever, we are all in a state of panic, which we should not be fearful, because the death rate in this COVID-19 is really less. So what exactly is fear? This COVID-19 there are three types of fear: psychological, emotional, and physical. This COVID-19 has given a physical fear amongst people, in which there is illness and there is injury to the patient's health. So what exactly this COVID-19 has done? The whole world has come to a paralysis, where all the buses, trains, and the gyms and malls are shut down, which has never happened before. Even staying in Mumbai, when I say that trains, the local trains, they function even in heavy rains, and even after even after the bomb blast which took place in 2007, I had not seen that the local trains were shut down. But now when I see the situation, the local trains are not working. They're only working for essential services. So local trains are shut down, which is never seen. And this is creating a lot of psychological fear in patients, and this psychological fear eventually leads to suicide. So we all should overcome this fear, and we should all, how can we all come over this fear? We can come over this fear by gaining some knowledge about this pandemic. Then we all should have some hope, and we should all have some way of resolving this problem. So the whole scientists all over the world are trying to resolve this. They are finding a lot of vaccines, medications. So the only thing we can keep is we should keep updating our knowledge, because every day there is something new which is happening regarding COVID-19. And we should all have some hope that in near future, this will come down and it will not affect the whole world. The one such example for hope is this lady who is Anna Del Well, who is 106 years old, and she has faced Spanish flu when she was 5 years old. And now when she is 106, she has already, she was infected with coronavirus, and she has beaten and she has overcome. So she is one of the best examples that we could face, and we could say that she can be an inspiration to everyone and some hope that we can beat this situation. Now, what exactly is coronavirus? This virus, I'll go a little bit in the structure because it is important. Coronavirus is roughly spherical, and it is particularly with bulbous projections. It has spikes, 72 spikes on the surface of the coronavirus. These spikes, when we wash with our hands with soap and water, why we are instructed that we should constantly keep washing our hands, cleaning, using sanitizers. When we use soap and water, we destroy the 72 spikes on the surface of the virus. So when the spikes are destroyed, the activity of the virus is not there, and that is the reason that we should constantly wash our hands. Now, coronavirus is a single-stranded RNA genome, and it is a non-living structure. It is on the borderline. It is called as a replicator, because when it gets injected in the body, or when it goes inside the body, then it becomes active and it replicates inside the body. It does not replicate when it is on the surface. It replicates when it attaches to the host cell of the body. So if we want to see how big the coronavirus is, the particulate matter, which is of 2.5 mm, that is the Cumber's particles or the organic compounds, whereas coronavirus is just 0.1 microns. If we see this chart, the coronavirus is the biggest particle, that is 10 microns. Then the RBCs are 7 microns. The particles, they are 2.5 microns. The bacteria are 0.5 microns, whereas the coronavirus is 0.1 microns. And no filter, even HEPA, which has been published, will not stop this, because 0.1 micron cannot be filtered. HEPA can maximum filter 0.3 microns. But this HEPA filter can take the larger particles, because coronavirus will be incorporated in some droplets, so that it can entrap. So what is the epidemiology? Coronavirus was basically a zoonotic origin, and it was supposed to origin from bats. It is transmitted from person to person. The viral shedding, it is very important to know the viral shedding of this virus, because it starts from 2 days to the 8th day. The 2nd day being where the patient starts getting the symptom, and by the 8th day, the symptom starts coming down. So when the symptoms are developed, the activity, the shedding of the virus is maximum. So it is also on the 17th day, it is seen that the coronavirus completely disappears from the body. So now the pathophysiology is normally when this coronavirus is ingested, it goes through the respiratory tract, and in very small portion. In some people it is asymptomatic, or they recover at a very early stage. But in some people it becomes very severe. And it goes to systemic diseases such as acute respiratory tract infection, sepsis, septic shock, multi-organ failure, and acute kidney injury and cardiac injury. And this eventually leads to death. So how is the coronavirus transmitted? There are 3 ways of transmission. It can transmit through droplets. it can transmit through aerosols, and it can transmit through fomites. What are fomites? Fomites are basically when the virus is on any surface, like on the table or any surface, but it is noted that only 0.1 virus is viable on fomites. So this cannot be the major place where the virus is being transmitted. Two major ways how the virus is transmitted is through droplets and through aerosols. See, so droplets, in the droplets, the virus, it stays in the air for around 2 to 3 minutes and then it settles down. Whereas in aerosols, it stays for around 15 to 20 minutes and then it settles down. So it is very important for this time period that we should take precaution, and we should try to clean the air of aerosols and droplets. So that is the reason, because of this India has come out with Mask India movement, in which we are all supposed to wear masks, even if we are stepping out of the house or even if we are going for grocery shopping. It is very important that we wear a mask, because if we wear a mask, first thing is that we will not transmit the disease, and the second thing is that we will not contract the disease. So this is a very nice example which shows that if a COVID-19 carrier is without mask, he can transmit the disease 90% of the time to a healthy. COVID-19 carrier without mask will transmit 70% of the time of the disease to a healthy contact with mask. And if there is a COVID-19 carrier with mask, only 5% of the time he will transmit to a healthy contact without mask. And if there is a COVID-19 carrier with mask, he will only transmit 1.5% of the times to a healthy contact with mask. So it is very important that we should wear mask, and a person who says that no, it's okay, even if I get disease, that's not a problem, he could be COVID positive and he could transmit a disease even if we are wearing a mask. So it is very important that everyone around us, whoever is speaking to us in this pandemic, we should only speak to them only if they are wearing a mask. They could be asymptomatic person who are transmitting disease. So how can we stop this disease? So the first rule, this CDC, the Central Disease Control, has given a lot of rules and regulations. So the basic rules we all have been hearing through a lot of media publications. The only thing is that we should keep a 6 feet distance between two people. Then we should cover our mouth while sneezing. We should wear a mask in the public area. We should not touch our eyes, nose, and mouth, because these are the only 3 ways where the virus can get inside your body. So we should not touch these areas. We should clean and disinfect the surfaces which are regularly in touch. Then we should stay at home if we are sick, and we should not go out unless and until we need medical care. And we should wash our hands for 20 seconds in regular intervals. So how this virus, there was a study done by China, in which a family from Wuhan had traveled to the other state in China, in which they saw that this family, one person was COVID positive and he was asymptomatic. He had gone to a restaurant, and there were other 2 families sitting with him in the same restaurant, and the air condition was on. So what exactly happened is, this person was asymptomatic, and then after 1 week, it was noticed that the other 2 families were also COVID positive. They had no interaction. They did not talk to each other. They had not shared any food, but still the other 2 people were COVID positive. So it was said that the airflow direction was, the airflow of the air condition was in such direction that the droplet was transmitted, and it had reached the other 2 families, and that is the reason why the other 2 families were also infected. So that is the reason why nowadays we are saying that in clinical setup, we should not switch on the air condition, and we should be working in where the ventilation of the clinic is good. So now recently, even it is said that it is transmitted through droplet, but recently it is said that it can also be transmitted through aerosols, and it can be in the air. And that means that if this is proven that it is airborne, then it means that the transmission of the disease will be higher, and it will be more risky for all of us if it is an airborne disease. So what exactly are the symptoms? Where being in and around with the COVID patients, I have seen that a lot of patients, definitely they come with fever, cough, and fatigue, body ache. But the most important sign what I have seen is that there is a lot of patients are complaining of loss of taste and smell, which is very peculiar of COVID-19, which is not seen in flu. So they are complaining of loss of taste and smell, which is not seen in all the patients, but definitely it is seen in COVID-19. Secondly, recently CDC has added diarrhea and nausea and vomiting to be one of the major signs in which it is said that the patient could be a COVID-19 patient. This list can still be added. Still, they are doing a lot of research in which the symptoms can increase. But according to me, the most important is fever, cough, shortness of breath, and fatigue, muscle and body ache, headache, loss of taste, soreness, congestion and runny nose, and then nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. When we should seek emergency medical care is when there is trouble in breathing, because we have noticed that patients in this, there is silent hypoxia in which patient, even after their SpO2, the normal should be around more than 95 and 97. But we see that when the SpO2 is dropping below 90, 89 and 88, still the patient is not feeling breathless. The SpO2 even has dropped in 50. That time the patient feels breathlessness. So in COVID-19, it is called as silent hypoxia, in which the patient is not aware that he has some trouble in breathing, but eventually when it drops to a very low level, then the patient starts feeling breathless. And if there is persistent pain in the chest and there is new confusion, inability to be awake, and if there is bluish lip and face, then these are all the situations where there should be an emergency, and emergency COVID patient should be taken to the hospital. Now, diagnostic tests are really important now. It's become, everyone is just running around to just go for and get their COVID-19 test and to see if they are COVID positive. But as a COVID warrior, I would suggest that me working here for almost 2 months, I have not got my test done because I have never developed a symptom. But even if you get a test done today and if you come negative, that does not mean that in next 10 days you won't get infected. So I would suggest that we should not go and just go do tests to be satisfied that I'm not COVID positive. I think only if you require and if you're symptomatic, we should go and get the test done. So the diagnostic test can be divided into two parts. There is direct test and there is indirect test. The direct test, it sees the presence of the virus in the body, whereas the indirect test, it is the immune response of the body. The presence of the virus can be seen by the RT-PCR and the rapid antigen test. These two tests are done by taking swab, nasopharyngeal or the oropharyngeal swab. RT-PCR test is one of the gold standards in which there is 65% of sensitivity. That means that when we do tests, in 100 patients, 65% of the cases will be positive. If they come positive, they are positive, but the 35% could be positive and they have come negative. So there are false negative reports, but there are no false positive reports in RT-PCR. If the patient has come positive, means that he is positive. And rapid antigen test, it is one of the tests which is done rapidly. In this test also, we detect the antigen. A swab is taken, and then there is a machine in which we put the swab and we check whether the antigen is present or no, and it gives a report in around 30 minutes, whereas RT-PCR takes around 4 to 6 hours, and also it takes 2 days for the report to come from the lab. So like that, rapid antigen test is a good test for screening. This is what we are exactly doing right now when we are doing the Mission Zero test. We are doing rapid antigen test for any symptomatic patient or any patient who was at high risk. We are doing rapid antigen tests now. This is being started. Now, what are these immune response tests, these antibody tests? I think this is there on the internet now, and everyone is asking what is an antibody test. So what happens in antibody test is when a person is infected, the person will develop antibodies, but it will not be in the initial stage of infection. It will be from the 7th day. Once the person is infected, from the 7th day, the person will start giving antibodies. That is the IgM, what we are seeing. That is the initially it is produced, and later the IgG is produced. So the antibody test is done to detect if that person is actually infected and he has gained an immune response for that infection. So that is why antibody tests are done. Antibody tests are done by taking blood samples, and the other two tests are done by taking swabs. So in this chart, we can easily see that asymptomatic patient, there is a window period of 0 to 5 days. The symptoms will normally develop from 2 to 3 days, and it will last for around 14 to 15 days. The symptoms will last. So on the 7th day, the IgM starts increasing. and it is at peak on the 14th day, and it declines on the 21st day. Whereas the IgG, it starts to increase on the 14th day and it stays in the blood for a few months. So the IgG test is one of the best tests to know whether you were previously infected and then now you are immune to that, immune to the virus. So basically IgG, if you IgG positive, then you can see that you were previously infected. And in this chart, it very easily explains that the viral testing, about the viral testing, the antibody testing, and both. So basically viral testing, if it is positive, that means you are currently infected and active COVID-19 infection is still there. And if you are negative, that you are not currently infected and you are at risk, you can get infected or you were previously infected. The antibody test, if it is positive, then that means that you had COVID-19 infection, and if this antibody test come negative, then you had never had a COVID-19 infection. And if we do both the tests, that is the viral testing and the antibody testing. Now, if the viral testing is positive and the antibody test is positive, that means that you are currently you have COVID-19 infection and you can give the virus to the others. If the viral test is positive and antibody test is negative, then it means that you are a active COVID-19 infected patient. If the viral test is negative and antibody is positive, that means that you were previously infected now, and now you have recovered from COVID-19. And now if the viral test is negative and the antibody test is also negative, that means that you had never had COVID-19 and you are at risk. So this is a simplified way of telling that if RT-PCR was positive, IgG is negative, you are an infected patient. If the RT-PCR is negative, the IgG is negative, then it is you are at risk. And if the RT-PCR is negative and IgG is positive, then you are possibly immunized by COVID-19. Then who should go and test? I started my lecture by saying that we all should not go and do the test. Now, who exactly should go and get the test done? So ICMR has given proper guideline who exactly should go and get the test done. So all symptomatic individuals who have undertaken international travels for last 14 days, all symptomatic contacts of laboratory confirmed cases, all symptomatic healthcare workers, all patients and severe respiratory illness patients should go and get the test done. Asymptomatic, direct and high risk contacts of confirmed cases should get test done between 5 to 14 days of coming in contact with the patient. Then, and all symptomatic ILIs, that is within 7 days, if the infection is, if we have symptoms, so within 7 days we can get RT-PCR done. And after the 7th day, we can do the antibody test. So only in this whole list, only asymptomatic patients of direct high risk should go and get, like if a person is infected, their family members who were in contact with that patient should go and get the test done. Otherwise, nobody needs to get the test done unless and until the patient is symptomatic. So what are the risk factors, risk assessment and risk factors? Nowadays, the SpO2 machine, I think everyone has seen that, and everyone can buy and keep it at their house. If the SpO2 is dropping below 94%, then it is a major concern. Then we should go and check. And one biggest thing is actually first you should get and check your machine, whether it is actually an authentic machine, because it has happened that patients have been coming to us saying that my SpO2 is 85 and actually the machine is faulty and there is no problem with the patient. So actually first you should buy a good SpO2 machine and then keep your oxygen saturation levels under constant check. And if the respiratory rate is more than 25 times per minute, then it is a concern. The major risk is for the patient who are aged above 65 years of age and they have other comorbidities like hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, chronic respiratory disease, cancer, renal disease, and obesity. So in this, we've seen that government has published that 73% of COVID-19 deaths in India, it has happened only with patients with comorbidities. A patient who does not have any other comorbidity but is infected will eventually recover and will come back. But what we have seen is that patients who have kidney disease and who have blood pressure, high blood pressure, who are diabetic, normally these are the patients who are not recovering, and people who are not. So it is very important that we should look after our health in this pandemic. Even after that we should not be infected and people who have these comorbidities should take more care. And also, it was said that smokers are being infected, but exactly what WHO says is that smoking does not does not increase the infectivity rate, but it increases the severity of disease in a patient. So if there is a smoker and he has other comorbidities, then the severity, if he's infected with COVID-19, the severity of the disease will be more in this patient as compared to a patient who does not smoke and he has comorbidity. So the severity of the disease will be more in patients who are smokers. So what exactly we are doing with patients, if we trace a patient and if he is COVID positive, so what exactly we are doing? So we divide these patients into 4 categories. They are asymptomatic, they are mild symptoms, moderate and severe symptoms. So if the patient is asymptomatic and he does not have any comorbidities, and if he is young, we normally ask them to be home isolated, stay at home for 14 days and do not, and see if there are any symptoms which are developing. There are other COVID care centers. So there are COVID care centers in hospitals. So COVID care center 1, COVID care center 2. These are COVID care centers which the government has designed, in which COVID care centers are normally hotels or it is isolation center. And in this area, there are no doctors available. It is only doctors are available on call if it is required. Then COVID care center 2, they are basically centers in which there are doctors which are available, and also there are some oxygen can be supplied to the patient if required. Then there are dedicated COVID health centers. So now, as we say, we might have seen in the news that NESCO and BKC has built up these big centers for COVID, to manage COVID patients. So basically, these centers are the centers in which there are patients who have breathlessness and the SpO2 is dropping below 94, but it is in the range of 90 to 94. In such patients, these dedicated COVID health centers can be managed, but ventilators and ICUs are not available in such centers. And then there are COVID dedicated hospitals in which all the facilities are available, from ICU to ventilators. So these are for the severe patients. So when the if the patient has mild symptoms, then it is uncomplicated upper respiratory tract infection and mild symptoms are there, then the patient is taken to COVID care center 2. If the patient has pneumonia and if the SpO2 is dropping below 94 and the respiratory rate is below 24 per minute, then the patient is taken to the dedicated COVID health centers. And if the patient is severe and if the SpO2 is dropping below 90 at room air, and if the respiratory rate is more than 30 breaths per minute, then we take the patient to COVID health hospitals. What are the medication that we are using? So medication basically, there are 2 categories: before getting infected and after getting infected. Before getting infected, it is very important that we boost our immunity. So there are a list of things that we could do to boost our immunity. And there are hydroxychloroquine, then they are also saying that remdesivir is used. Then there are a lot of homeopathic and allopathic medicines. We do not know how authentic or how helpful they are exactly, but in municipal corporation, Arsenal Alum 30 is actually been given to all the workers and all the doctors so that we could take this. And I have also taken Arsenal Alum 30, but I don't know how effective it is. And even Patanjali has come out with Coronel. There is no data whether exactly it is working or it is just that it's a marketing gig, that they are coming out with new medicines and people buy it out of out of panic. But I would suggest that unless and until there is any data, do not go for any medication and do what you can do to boost your immunity, and do not go for medications. Hydroxychloroquine is not advised for people who have heart diseases and who are sensitive to it. So I would suggest that boosting your immunity would be the best thing that we could do right now before getting infected. And after getting infected, there is a list of drugs which are being tried. There are no authentic, there is no medicine which has been proven to be effective in COVID, but these are all medicines that they are trying, and they are actually coming out to help to recover patients. So that's the reason they are being using it. There are antiviral drugs, there are immune-based drugs, and then there is antithrombotic drugs, that is low molecular weight heparin is being used. So I would give some idea about how can we boost our immunity, because everyone is saying that we should boost our immunity. There was Ministry of Ayush has come out a list of things that we could do to boost our immunity. So there are these general measures in which we could do. We could drink water throughout the day, warm water throughout the day, improve our diet. We should not compromise on sleep. We should not skip exercise. Exercising is one of the best way to boost your immunity. De-stress yourself by daily practice of yoga and pranayama and meditation for at least 30 minutes. Avoid alcohol and smoking. Then supplement boosters like vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. We are also giving these to the patients: vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. Then spices such as turmeric, cumin, coriander, and garlic. These are all traditionally written in our books, and we should be trying to incorporate this more in our food daily basis so that we boost our immunity. Ayurvedic immune promoters, they have actually advised to use Chyawanprash, which is there. And there are herbal drinks or decoctions, or as we call it, kadha, which is there, which includes tulsi, then there is cinnamon, black pepper, dry ginger, resin. We should all mix this and then use it once or twice in a day. We could add jaggery to it. And then there are other milk like golden milk, which is haldi, the hot turmeric and hot milk. These are all traditional things, but these are actually seen to be helpful in COVID-19 to boost your immunity. Then there are simple things like oil pooling and nasal application of oil, sesame oil and coconut oil and ghee, which we could apply. These are seen to be helpful, and these are seen to boost your immunity. Then if there is a dry cough, if the patient has a dry cough, then we should go for steam inhalation with pudina and with ajwain, and then long powder can be used with honey if we have dry cough. If even after taking these measures, the dry cough is still persistent, it is advised to see a doctor and then take the proper treatment for it. So what are the potential antiviral drugs? Right now, what we see recently, I saw news saying that Kerala has used hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, the combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, and they have seen a good result, but there is no authentic report of it. Then they have been using remdesivir. This is the recent medicine which has been used, and it has shown to enhance, and it has to help to recover patients. Then there are a lot of HIV disease, the drugs which are being used, but they are now eliminated. They are not seem to be working. So remdesivir is being given by CDC as one of the most recent drug, and it is being helpful to recover from the patients. And FabiFlu, which was introduced recently, Glenmark has done a lot of advertisement of it, but there is no proper data whether actually it has been working. So there are a lot of drugs which are being marketed or which are being told every day that this is effective, but there is no proper data. So it's better to be safe and not to go for multiple drugs which are being advertised every day. And we should try to be taking more precautions. So there are a lot of immune-based medicines. I've seen that patients are actually recovering by injections of interleukin-6 inhibitors like tocilizumab. They have been injected, and the patients are been recovering. So one of my actually very close friends' parents had been infected, and he has been injected by these, and he has recovered after that. But one very important thing is that the patient should be having less comorbidities or controlled diabetes. This is a very important thing. People who have comorbidities are not able to recover even after giving all these medicines. So when we come to dentistry, dentistry as a branch is actually one of the safest branch, as I can say, because we have been practicing all the sterilization protocol. We have not, if we visit a normal physician, we have not seen that these physicians are actually sterilizing their instruments or their stethoscopes. But when we as dentists, when we see, we actually are practicing this sterilizing protocol since many years. In 1981, when HIV hit, that time also we were saying that dentistry will be a branch, will be highly affected. But we all have come up with various protocols, and we have been we have fought HIV, and we are practicing. So hopefully that even COVID-19, everyone is saying that dentistry, how the dentists are going to practice. But I feel that if we take proper precautions, I think we can manage and we can do practice. In 2003, CDC has given guideline for dental profession. And if we go through the whole paper, what CDC has written, all that we are following right now, with N95s to PPEs to face shields, and they are all mentioned in 2003 CCD. So this is nothing new that we are seeing everyone wearing PPEs nowadays. It is not a new thing. It was already there. It's just that right now everyone is trying to use it, and it is actually helpful, and people are using PPEs. But what these guidelines were given in 2003, and there are very less records for transmissible diseases in dental operatory, only because we are taking a lot of disinfectant protocols. We are managing a lot of disinfection. So if we see who can actually practice in this situation, there are dental clinics. It can be divided in various areas like containment zones. In this area, the clinic should be shut, and it should be only patient should be only consulted over telephone, and they should given proper medication. Or if there is an emergency, the patient should be visited by ambulance service to a nearby COVID dental facility. If it is a red zone, then emergency and dental procedures can be performed. If the dental clinic is in the orange and green zone, then the emergency and urgent dental care can be done. Routine elective procedures still needs to be deferred till further protocols and guidelines are given by the authority. And any cancer screening should be deferred till more guidelines are being given. Now, what exactly we need to do in our dental clinics? There is a preparatory phase, there is implementation phase, and follow-up. In this preparatory phase, what we can do is hydroxychloroquine prophylaxis can be taken. 6 air changes per hour. This is the minimum that we should be expecting, that 6 air changes can be done. It can be incorporated by incorporating HEPA filters, or it can be done by incorporating the exhaust fan. A positive and negative air pressure can be built, and this is how we can do the 6 air conditions per hour. Then there are various equipments and instruments we need to buy before we open our clinic. These are the masks and the PPEs, the face shields. Then in the implementation phase, there are teleconsultations which can be done, screening can be done. Then when the patient visits our clinic, there should be povidone iodine, that is 10 ml of povidone iodine should be given to the patient. Normally and in this pandemic, we should have forehand dentistry. We should practice forehand dentistry, and high vacuum suctions can be used, and rubber dams can be used. The follow-up can be done of these patients, whoever patient we are treating. A follow-up, a 1 week follow-up, and 24-hour and 1 week follow-up should be done to see if the patient has developed any symptoms. And if the patient is reporting that he has developed symptoms of COVID-19, then we should take measurements, we should shut down our clinic, and then do the proper testing of the doctor as well as the assistant if any patient is diagnosed with COVID positive post-treatment. So what are the ICMR guidelines for hydroxychloroquine prophylaxis? It is basically what they say is asymptomatic healthcare workers involved in the care of suspects and confirmed cases of COVID-19 should take this prophylaxis, and asymptomatic household contacts of laboratory confirmed cases should take hydroxychloroquine. So what are the doses for healthcare workers? It is 400 milligrams twice a day on the first day, followed by 400 milligrams once weekly for next 7 weeks. And if it is an asymptomatic household contact, then it should be given 400 milligrams twice a day for first day, and then 400 milligrams once a week for next 3 weeks. Hydroxychloroquine should be given. So any dental procedures can be divided into 4 categories. It can be dental emergencies, any dental urgent dental care, other urgent dental care, and non-urgent dental care. So the dental emergencies include the uncontrolled bleeding, cellulitis, which can spread, intra and extraoral swelling can be caused, and which is compromising on patient's airway, and a trauma involving facial bone potentially compromising the patient's airway. Then there are urgent dental care like severe dental pain from pulpal inflammation, pericoronitis, or third molar pain. Then there can be surgical post-operative osteitis, dry socket dressing changes. Then abscess or localized bacteria infected resulting in localized pain and swelling. Tooth fracture resulting in pain. Then there is dental trauma of avulsion and luxation. Then there is dental treatment requiring prior to critical medical procedures. Then final crown and bridge cementations are left and biopsy of abnormal tissue. So what are the safety measures? This is very important to know that what are the safety measurements that we should take when we are working in our clinics. So it is very important that we have we use our hand hygiene is maintained, and we use our PPE, respiratory hygiene is done, and we have sterilized instruments and devices, and clean and disinfected environment is very important when we get back to our practice. So this is a very important 8-step given to hand hygiene. What we exactly are doing right now, we are just taking some alcohol-based thing and we are just rubbing our hand. That does not say that we are completely disinfected. There is a proper procedure. There is a proper protocol how we are supposed to do our hand hygiene. So basically, we take some amount of alcohol-based hand sanitizers. We rub our hand with from our palm to palm, and then we go behind and we rub the back of our hand, both the hands. We rub the back of our hand. Then the third procedure is to clean interlace the fingers, and the third procedure is to clean the surface like this from the inner surface. The third is to clean the thumb area and then the tip of your finger. It is very important that we clean the tip of our finger. This is how the hand hygiene should be done, and not just taking the sanitizer and rubbing your hand. The whole hand as well as your wrist should be properly sanitized, and this whole procedure should take around 20 to 30 seconds. So while wearing masks, what is important that when we are wearing masks, there should be a proper fit of the mask. The mask cannot be just below your nose or it is in your neck, and we are saying that yes, we are wearing mask. No, when we are wearing a mask, there should be a proper fit of the mask. There should be a proper seal. There shouldn't be any air leakage which is taking place. And when we are removing the mask, we should properly sanitize our hand, and then we should remove the mask from the straps and not from the front surface of the mask, because it could be infected. So the only way is to sanitize your hand first and then remove it through the strings. When we are wearing respirators, the best thing to respirators is that the good thing about respirators is there is a proper fit of these respirators. So while wearing a respirator, we should place the respirator, the nose and the chin should be completely covered, and we should check for the fit. And once we are wearing the respirator, we should hold the respirator and then blow air so that to see if there is any air leakage. If there is, we should tighten the straps. So it is very important that we wear the mask properly and not wear it just for because we are instructed to wear masks. And the strap should be properly tightened, and while removing, we should not touch the front surface of the mask. That is very important. In the even for N95, it is very important that we remove the upper strap and then we remove the lower strap and throw it in a proper waste container and then sanitize our hands. So PPEs are of various types that we see. Everyone is confused that PPE means that gown, what we are wearing, the big gown, and that these are not PPE. Exactly, PPE includes other face shield and goggles, the N95, the pair of sterile gloves, and the isolation gown. These are all included in a PPE. PPE does not mean the gown and the face shield is separate and N95 is separate. No. Personal protective equipment actually include everything from the face till your body. So for dentists, it is very important that we take care of our face and we prevent from anything getting incorporated in our face. So it is important that we wear goggles, face shields, and masks. So there are various steps of donning and doffing of PPE. I would play a small video and it will be easy for you to understand. So there are multiple ways in which PPE can be worn, and how the PPE can be done. It is multiple ways in which. So one of the ways which I am going to show is how do we prepare. We should see that everything is on the table, like our PPE gowns, till the face shield and the mask, and the gloves are there. Mask, it could be the authorized NOISH approved mask should be there for any procedure. Then we could also use a normal face mask, a triple layer face mask, and a face shield and goggles can be used. A pair of sterile gloves should be used. So first we should maintain the hand hygiene. We should do our hand hygiene, properly clean the hand and wrist as well. And then we should sanitize our hand. Then we should wear the isolation gown. In this, there are multiple various types of isolation gown. In this isolation gown, it should have a proper fit, and we can need an assistant if required to properly close the PPE gown. And in this procedure, we should properly lock all the strips. There shouldn't be any loose ends while wearing the PPE. Then for the respirators, it is very important that we see the fit of the respirator while wearing the N95. It is important that we place the upper end of the respirator on the nose, and the lower end should cover the chin. It should not be too big or too small. There are sizes for respirators, and we should buy a proper size for the respirator. Then while holding the front part, we should engage the string on the back of the forehead, and then the lower end should be on the nape of the neck. And then we should check the fit of the respirator. So how do we check the fit of the respirator? Is by blowing air, by holding the respirator from front and then blowing air through the mouth. And if there is air which is coming out, then we should see if there is any leakage. If there is, then we should properly tighten the straps. And if there is no leakage, then we are safe and we can go ahead with the further thing. So the next step in this would be to wear your face shield and goggles. So when we wear our face shield, face mask, and if there is if the N95 is not available, we can go ahead and wear our face mask. And we should, if there are ties, then we should tie it on our back of the head. And if there is if there are strings, we should engage it through your ear. And even the face mask should be covering our nose and the lower part of our chin. It should not be above or below our chin. Later, we should wear a face shield and goggles. Face shield should be worn to prevent from any aerosols. And the last thing what we should be wearing is the gloves, and then we are ready to move out for the procedure. So there are various doffing procedures that we are doing. There are steps in doffing. So before we move out, I'll play a video for doffing of the PPE gown. The first thing what we should do is that we should remove our gloves. So how do we remove our glove? First, we pinch the outer surface of the glove. So in this also there are multiple ways. This is one of the ways that we are showing how we can doff the PPE gowns. So the first way, before leaving the patient's room, we should remove our gloves. So how do we remove our glove? Is we pinch the outside of the glove of one hand and remove the glove and hold it in the other hand. And then from the inner surface of the other glove, we should roll the glove over it and remove the glove. And the inner surface should be outside and the outside surface should be inside. So that is how we remove the glove. And this is the other method, that is beaking method, in which we make a beak of the glove in one hand and then hold the other hand and remove the other glove. And then we can put it in a proper bin. Then we should remove our PPE gowns. While removing the PPE gown, we should take care that the outside surface is rolled and it is placed outside, and the inside surface is out and outside is in, so that if there is any contaminated area, the worker who's carrying this PPE gown should not get infected or should not be contaminated by the virus on the PPE gown. Now, after this, we should follow hand hygiene again. Then we should follow hand hygiene again, and then we should remove our face shield and mask. After doing proper hand hygiene, we should remove the face shield and the mask. So now whatever waste is being produced can be managed. These biological waste should be properly managed, otherwise it will lead to cross infection. So there should be proper segregation of the waste. Before, when we are actually removing the PPEs, we should place it in proper bins. There are yellow colored bins which are designated for PPE. So we should properly segregate the waste, collect and store the waste, and then it should be properly, with a lot of precautions, it should be transported to the area, and then it should be properly disposed. So any PPE gown, it should be a color coded bin should be present, that is yellow colored bin should be present. A double layered yellow color bag is required so that there is no leakage and spillage. These materials should be later taken to an area and it should be incinerated, or deep burial should be done, or plasma pyrolysis can be done. And inner and outer surface of the bin should be disinfected with 1% sodium hypochlorite. So now there are recent researches which has come. This is the end part of my presentation, in which there are a lot of people who claim that these vaccines will come by August 15th. But if you take my opinion, I don't think that more than a year any vaccine could be there. If it comes, it is good for us, because that is the only hope right now to stop this viral load. So Bharat Biotech has claimed that they are coming up with a vaccine till August 15th. Then also there are researchers, but we do not know. They say that people or countries who have taken BCG vaccine are less prone to COVID-19. This is a research which was done recently, and they say that it was been seen that people who have taken BCG vaccine are less infected. Also, it is said that povidone iodine as nasal spray and mouthwash can be used in this pandemic, and it is more helpful, and it can be used as an adjunct to PPEs in this COVID-19 patients, and it helps to reduce risk to the healthcare worker. So now I would end my slide by saying that we should learn to live with COVID rather than running away or fearing this disease, because this is not going to go that easily or very soon, unless and until some proper medication or some vaccine has been found for this COVID-19, which seems to be difficult because MERS and other diseases, still the vaccines are not there, but we are still trying to find vaccines for COVID-19. So I think we should all start to learn to live with COVID-19. And what I would say is, when I came here for the first day, even I was very fearful, using sanitizers every 10 seconds, and I was very fearful. But when I see the other workers, the other lot of nurses and lot of doctors working, and when I see, I think they have learned to live with this, and they think that it is very normal. This is actually the new normal. We should all accept it, and we should all start living with it. There's a very nice video. I'm sorry, I think the music is not there, but there is this doctor who's been very inspiring. I would just play this. This is a very positive video. So what are my take-home messages? That first thing is that every patient we treat in our clinic should be treated as a COVID-19 patient, and we should take proper care. We should not treat that, okay, this patient does not have symptoms, means he is not, so it's okay if I don't wear a PPE, or it's okay if I don't wear a mask. No, it is not like that. The patient could be asymptomatic and you could get infected. So every patient, at least for next 6 months, every patient who comes to your clinic should be treated as a COVID-19 patient. We all need to keep patients in this panic situation, and we should not just go around running around and doing tests and coming out with negative or positive report. And we should not look down on people who are detected COVID positive, because now it has become that people are saying, oh, you're COVID positive. They are, it's such a bad thing. It's not, it's just a pandemic, it's just a disease, or it is happening. So we should not look down on people who are actually infected. It's better to be safe than sorry. So we should take all the precautions, wear masks when we step out. We all are hoping to find a medicine for this and vaccine in near future, and hopefully it does come. And we do not have a test. We should not all go and do tests out of fear and panic. Only if you have symptoms, please go and get the test done, and not because I want to get, because I'm fearful, or if I just have mild fever, so I'll just go and get it done. Because what I have seen, that the patient is negative normally, but when he visits any diagnostic center or any hospital, and there are infected patients, and from there they take the infection and they are coming home. So it is better to stay home and not step out to get these tests done. And what we should see is, we should see what are the recent updates. So we should always keep what our eye does not know, our mind does not know. So we should keep our eyes open to see what are the latest upcoming news that is coming, and we should only take the positive news, and we should not take all the rumors which is roaming around. So we should take all the positive news on the internet. So we all actually could be a COVID warrior only by wearing a mask. We all can be COVID warriors. So I would request everyone to wear a mask and step out of the house. Thank you.
Very good presentation, Priya. You gave us a lot of information. And now I invite questions from the audience. Please type it in the Q&A chat box. Then it will be asked to the presenter and she will answer it. Any questions?
There is a question by Dr. Nandalal. How will institutions conduct university exams when there is no option to give routine treatment?
So, ma'am, thank you for the question. I think that's how now recently the exams were conducted, and it was done online. Actually, nobody was ready for this pandemic and how we are going to face it. But I think now the colleges have actually come out with online exams and they are doing it. So that is the best solution. Even I feel that they have done. They have taken a lot of care by doing video calling and taking the exams. That is the only way right now, and that is the only way we can all be safe. So I think that's how it has been done.
Yeah, by Dr. Siddhi Chaurasia, it is, why do dentists need to sanitize their hands when they are already wearing a PPE?
Okay, so the thing is that it is not about sanitizing your hand when you are wearing PPE. So the thing is, even if you are already infected, if you previously, maybe if you've touched on some surface and there was virus, and then you touch your glove, so your glove gets infected, right? So it is important that before touching any sterile material, PPE kit, we need to sanitize our hand first and then touch any sterile. Because if our hand is infected, then we are infecting the other things. If we are touching our PPE, even that gets infected. So it is better to sanitize our hand and then touch any any PPE material.
Yeah, and one Miss Christina Sharon has thanked you and is requesting it to be uploaded in the YouTube. So Priya, we will try to do this.
Okay.
And I think you did a very good presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for all the support. And
we feel very happy to see you, and we are very proud of you.
Thank you, ma'am. And I would also want to thank Sheila, ma'am. She gave me an opportunity that I could share a bit what I'm doing. She has always been an enthusiast like that. She always encourages all her students that we should come up and we should do it. If she was not there, I would have not given this presentation. I would like to thank Deepika ma'am. She's always been a support to me. Like even in the days when I was not, for 3 years, when I've passed and come here, Deepika ma'am is on and off always asking me, what are you doing? How are you doing? So she's always been like a mother to me, and she's always been a guide. And Dr. Avinash, he is someone I am till date, if I have any problem with my cases or when I'm stuck with any case, I don't know what to do. The only person who comes to my mind is Dr. Avinash. So I would like to thank all 3 of them for giving me an opportunity to present this.
Priya, one more question is there.
Yes, ma'am.
They're asking about the role of corticosteroids in COVID treatment.
So basically, yes, they are using corticosteroids because they are saying that it helps in the amount of the immunity. Our immune system is going haywire in COVID-19. So they are trying dexamethasone and they are trying other medicines. But again, there is no proper data whether it is actually effective. They are considering one case, and if they see that the patient has less comorbidities, they are trying with multiple medications, and dexamethasone and other corticosteroids are actually being used. So I think they are using it, but there is no proper data which says that yes, this is effective or this is not effective. So there are multiple trial and other things which are being done right now.
So back to Deepika, madam. Dr. Deepika can say a few words.
Yeah,
and Avinash can also join in.
Yeah. I think there are a few more questions. We'll just have a look. Somebody's asked how exactly anti-malarial drug will be prophylactic drug. How exact anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine will be a prophylactic drug with interaction in body, because we are dealing with coronavirus. Can you explain?
So basically it is antiviral. So they are considering it as a virus. They are considering coronavirus as a virus, and that is the reason they have tried HCQ as an antiviral drug. So just because it is an antiviral drug, they have tried, and actually initially they thought that there were results. Then there was a report saying that it is not useful in patients who are actually diagnosed with COVID-19. It is not effective. But till date, now also WHO recently came out that HCQ is effective for prophylaxis because it reduces the viral load in the body. Even if you're going to get infected, it acts as a prophylaxis, but not after getting infected. Once you are infected, it does not help. So that's how HCQ is helpful for prophylaxis.
And somebody else asked about the role of corticosteroids.
Yes, ma'am, that I said.
You have already said that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
No, there is a question that is there a mild form of COVID-19 where people report fever and body ache for few days, then they are okay. All tests are negative.
Okay. So this is a good question. Actually, there are no forms of coronavirus. There is no mild, moderate, or severe forms of coronavirus. It is basically once a person is infected, how that person's immunity is fighting that virus is how our body responds. Like if a person, like a young age person like me, or with no comorbidities, maybe I might have got infected and I have not developed any symptoms, and I am, if I go and get my antibody test, I might get IgG in my blood group. That means I was infected and I did not have any symptoms. That is actually happening, that we have seen. So I would definitely would want to thank GSS to giving me this opportunity. And I would thank Deepika ma'am, Dr. Sheila, and Dr. Avinash for always being so supportive and encouraging me to do new things.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to hear from you. I think with this, we conclude.
Yeah, sure. So it's nice to see Priya in this platform, and we hope to see you again in other platforms also. So wish you all the best and take care of yourself.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks.